My armor is like tenfold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws spears, the shock of my tail is a thunderbolt, my wings are a hurricane, and my breath, death. Here's a look at the McFarlane toys Dragons, the Lord of the Rings, Smaug. Bilbo, Gandalf, and a motley crew of dwarves continue their quest to retake the dwarf kingdom of Erebor from the dragon Smaug in Part 2 of the Hobbit trilogy. Facing danger at every turn from orcs, giant spiders, and even wood elves, the surly bunts make their way to Smaug's lair where untold treasure awaits, if the fire-breathing beast doesn't burn them to a crisp first. A deadly dragon to beat, with an even harder name to say. Before, of course, we get a closer look at the McFarlane Dragons, the Lord of the Rings, or the Hobbit if you prefer Smaug, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did kindly provide this sample we could have a look at. Smaug should be available right now if you guys are interested, whether it be online or whether it be in stores. Smaug should be available either way. I'm going to grab the tape measure also as well to measure off the wingspan of the dragon. Now, this one is a dragon that's going to be sitting pretty close to his display stand as he's guarding the treasure around him. From one end of his wing to the other, you're looking at the dragon being about 8.5, almost even 9 inches in width, or it's going to be about 22 centimeters wide. To come included with the dragon, you get yourself a trading card. The trading card spotlights Smaug on the front of it, as well as borders his name down below. On the back, it does show his name, of course, being Smaug, and as well, it gives you a paragraph read to digest if you want to. So it happens to be the same thing I read at the beginning of this review. Now, I know we always get these cards when it comes to McFarlane toy releases. I think specifically the ones that come included with the dragons, I think they should go the route of giving that same sort of podium standee. Not the high ones for the DC Multiverse ones, but the little more smaller ones that they usually use from the movie Maniacs. Give us something like that for the dragon line, where you can predominantly feature the card along with the dragon itself. Now, with the dragon, there was some assembly that was required. First of all, you had to take the wings and attach them onto the sides of Smaug's body. This isn't something that usually is easy, because there's always one section of the wing that never attaches properly. Sure enough, easily enough, I could attach the peg here and a peg here, but then the same similar pegs then on the opposite side. I could attach this one easily enough, but then this one I couldn't get in completely. What I might just very well do is remove this altogether, heat this maybe with hot water, and see if I can put the wing back in to get a more seamless look. But it usually is always the case when we look at these dragons, that there's always one wing that never sits properly. Of course, one other thing that had to be done as well is take the dragon and attach him onto his display stand. The display stand very predominantly features the treasure that Smaug is protecting. On the bottom, though, while it may be a little bit harder to remove the dragon, I'm going to show you at least the place that they plug in place. There's one right here, a plug right here, a section here, and a place over here. All of those plugs are on the bottom of the dragon's feet and wings, and you just attach them in place. Sort of similar to the wings, though, there are a few of them that I could actually attach very easily, but by the nature of the softer plastic that they use for the display stand, you can kind of see there's too much give, that trying to put pressure against this, I can only get a few of them securely in place. There's always this one, kind of like the wing, that never attaches securely, and obviously I don't want to break the display stand either. Speaking of stands, though, on the bottom of it, you can see it's been cast in gold plastic, and yet what they ended up doing, though, was they painted a much darker gold to simulate the tiny little coins and treasure that he's protecting. A nice little touch of details to the fact that there's little tiny stairwells to give you the really scale of how big Smaug actually is. Featured on the front as well, there's also a little placard that tells you it's the Lord of the Rings. Now, they could have also swapped this out for the Hobbit, but maybe they want to use Lord of the Rings because it just takes up a little bit more space on the actual placard. And then of course, there's Smaug down below there. I don't know if you can actually really even make it out because the dragon, again, is very close to his treasure he's protecting. But there's mostly all here coins. There's a few random little placements of treasure chests and a few little orbs and stones and jewels and stuff like that. But the most of it is actually really only painted here in gold. It is kind of really hard to make out these are supposed to be coins. I mean, if you look at them really kind of close, it kind of looks a little bit like honeycombs. But again, like painted it well as they could. I mean, obviously the coins are going to be quite small when you compare them against the scale of Smaug. Looking at the detail, though, of the dragon, first of all, the face, that mouth you can see is currently open. Luckily for all of us, it's not breathing fire. The tongue is sticking out, and I love the way it's been colored. Mostly here in white, although little accent areas here of yellow. The yellow is similar to the kind of yellow that they painted underneath the tongue. placement of little tiny teeth are also here as well, both on the bottom of the jaw and on top of the jaw, although it's probably, again, not a good idea to get so close to the dragon. Speaking of getting close to the dragon, I mean, the people that painted this piece, I mean, would have really had to get really close in there to paint the things like his eyes, for example. The paint is really quite clean, too. So I don't know if this is actually factory painted or somebody has been painting this by hand. But either way, I don't really have any real paint problems. Dragons, obviously, they could get away with a little bit of splotching. I've got, for example, a little bit of splotched black down below here. But otherwise, like, the coloring in the paint is handled really well here. I like the way that they've colored and sculpted the bottom of his neck. So again, you've got a little bit of wrinkles and kind of the looser skin onto the bottom of the dragon's neck. You got these little spikes that he has also on the top of his head. These are all kind of more of a softer plastic. So very unlikely that anything like this would be potentially breaking. And of course, he also has all these spikes that run down the top of his neck, then across the spine of his main body, and then all the way down to his tail. The tail really is the only thing that has any little bit of posability. I mean, all the wings and all the neck, for example, even though the neck does in a way kind of look like you could be able to swivel it back and forth. In fact, the only thing you really could move back and forth is Smaug's tail. The thing about the tail, though, is it's always the case whenever you sculpt something like this. I mean, it looks fine like this, but the moment you start to move it around, it's obviously going to be breaking up that detailing, and it's not going to look consistent. So even though they really did put tail articulation, I don't honestly think for Smaug's case they really needed to add tail articulation. They should have just easily kept it straight like this. It's exactly the way I'm going to be displaying it, and I'm sure most of the way people are going to be displaying it as well. The only thing I would say, though, the way they've painted this, and I've got to say, first of all, I really love the way they've done the wings. The wings are kind of a very dark auburn red, and then you've got some darker colors and patches here of a little bit more of an airbrushed brown that they've added in between the sections of the wings. Of course, the main spines of the hands and the fingertips that stretch across the wings, those are nicely done here in black paint as well. It's not a very stark black either. They've kind of done it in such a way where you see a little bit of the red still bleeding through. I like that because, of course, it's too stark, I think, if they were just to paint it completely black. By adding a little allowances where a bit of the color can actually bleed through from the wings, gives, again, a more organic look to it. The only thing I will say, though, is as you get to the bottom of the tail, I know I did say kind of like the paint was pretty nicely done here for the most part here for Smaug, but there are a few little areas on the back of the tail where you can see like the paint gets a little messy. Like you can see obviously it's a creature, so they don't have to make it following the lines exactly when you're coloring it, but there are a few little areas, of course, you can kind of see where it's bled onto the red. No harm, no foul. All in all, though, it's a really nice looking dragon. The thing about the Smaug, though, Smaug is one of those characters, of course, he's going to be always guarding his treasure. Because of that, his build and the way they've actually designed the form of the figure is that he's going to be really close to his display stand. We've got, in fact, actually a couple of other dragons as well that follow the same suit. I mean, ideally, I would have loved if maybe Smaug could have actually had his more wings outward, so it would just given him a more dynamic-looking pose. But again, if you follow the story of Smaug and how he's guarding his treasure, I guess it makes the most sense that they would have given him a pose like this, so very close to the ground, so very close to the treasure he's protecting. I don't know about you guys, but when I first heard that McFarlane was going to relaunch the dragon line, I had a few notable dragons that were pretty high on my list for ones I wanted to see them release. Pretty high on that list was the Hobbit's Smaug. Even though really on the placard it's called Lord of the Rings, we all know, of course, it's under the big story umbrella of the Lord of the Rings. That's one thing I wish that they could have actually put on the placard, The Hobbit, as opposed to Lord of the Rings. Because again, Smaug gets featured predominantly in the Hobbit trilogy, not necessarily in the earlier released Lord of the Rings films. Despite that, though, it's a really nice looking dragon. I prefer myself to have the dragons with a farther wingspan, so they look a little bit more interesting on the shelf, but I can certainly justify the choices that they made to have the dragon so close to his treasure like this, and Smaug looks fantastic. Like I said, because it's a fire dragon, they cast it mostly here in sort of an orangey red plastic. They painted then in between the individual spines of the wings, a slightly lighter coloring of that brown. Then, of course, they also did coloring, not necessarily a stark black, but rather they diluted a black paint to paint all the individual spinal sections of the fingers and the spine that runs down the front of his body. I prefer that because it looks a little bit more organic. I know obviously some people probably would have preferred to have that just a stark black. I like the chance and opportunity for some of the coloring of the red to peek its way through. It makes the dragon look a little bit more realistic. What do you guys think of Smaug? Let me know down below in the comments section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the Lord of the Rings, or the Hobbit, if you will, Smaug, that we can have a look at in this review. Have you guys been collecting any of the McFarlane dragons? If you have, Let me know down below in the comment section which ones you guys got. Also, hey, as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly would like to stick around for more, we may not be finished, well, we may already be finishing up things for Smaug, but I can tell you we are going to be looking at another dragon, not necessarily from Lord of the Rings, but one from Harry Potter. That will be coming up in an upcoming review. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.